Yep.
Three.
Team, we're good.
Team.
I made the font bigger, Chrissy. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. We'll get started with the time of worship. And yeah, so there's hymnals if you don't already have one. Hymnals.
Via one.
And, yeah. So, and reminder to all of our guests, we are web streaming live, so avoid any obscene gestures or otherwise things that might embarrass you on a job interview in 5 years. Just kidding.
As it is famously said, check yourself before you
wreck yourself.
Well played, not check yourself.
5 years down the road.
I know. So glad I grew up in a different era. And feel free, if you want to stand, feel free to stand. No requirement to. Abba, we thank you and we praise you for this time that we have to be gathered together. We thank you, Abba Father, that you have first loved us and we can love you. We thank you, Abba Father, for your promises of an eternal age to come, that we can put our hope and our trust in you, and that by the blood of your Son, Yeshua, we know that we are sealed for that day. So we want to come before you this morning. We want to bring an offering of our praise and a sacrifice of our worship this morning. We want to come into your presence, Abba Father, with thanksgiving, with joy. And as we draw closer into your holy place with reverence. Abba Father, you are worthy of all our praises. You are worthy of songs that we could never achieve, Father, in our human nature. But we humbly come before you this morning and ask and pray that as we do sing these songs, as we praise you, Abba Father, as we enter into your presence with an attitude of praise and worship, that you would meet us here in this place. Holy Spirit, that you would be welcome here. Give you all the praise and honor and glory in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen.
wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than yours. Abba, we seek your face here in this place today. We want to know you. We want to call upon your name. For you are the uncreated one. We seek you, Father. Remove the scales from our eyes that we may see you. Show us your way. Show us who you are. In Yeshua's name.
We seek you, Lord, while you may be found. We call upon you while you're near. We seek you, Lord, while you may be found. We call upon you while you're near. join myself to you. I join myself to you. Meekness and lowliness. I wanna get lost in love in the ocean of your love. I wanna get lost in love, meekness and lowliness. I wanna get lost in love in the ocean of your love. I wanna get lost in love, meekness and lowliness. Oh, Abba Father, we just praise you, Abba Father, from the depths of our being this morning. We thank you, Lord, that you have created each and every one of us here, Father, with a unique destiny and purpose, Father, and plan. Abba, we just praise you, the very essence of who you are, Lord. We thank you for this time that we have to be gathered here on your Shabbat to put aside our cares, Lord. So just bless the remainder of our time of fellowship this morning, our time of studying in your word, Lord. We give you all the praise and honor and glory in Yeshua's name. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Lamb slain since the beginning of the world. Praise you, Yeshua.
All right, so we have to keep it PG now that we're back live. So everybody put your sailor language in check, please. I know it was flowing freely at the break, because that's just the type of crowd we have, apparently. All right, well, welcome everybody. Couple new people, welcome. Couple old timers, welcome back. It's good to kind of start getting into a groove. So any generic comments, announcements, anything we want to cover?
Party tonight.
Pate tonight. Everybody in this room is invited. 6:30, Frito Pie. It's a graduation party for those that graduated starting May through July. We have a couple across the board.
Always like, leave me alone.
So we didn't really have an opportunity we weren't here in May. So we in particular didn't have the opportunity to have graduation celebration. So that's going to be tonight, because it looks like everybody that graduated came back. So, suckers.
So 6:30 cocktails.
6:30 cocktails. We'll have a time of blessing at 7 probably, thereabouts, somewhere in there. And then we'll eat right after and just kind of visit and have fun. So everybody here is welcome to come, for sure.
There's like 35 people signed up, including Hez's cronies.
Yeah, however many that ends up
Our
being.
band of prophets.
Also from 3 to 5, field day. If you want to go to tech and have fun on a field in the hot sun with water balloons and other things.
Nice.
So from 3 to 5, go to the athletic field.
All right, and then also Tuesday we have our relationship study starting up. You do not have to be in a relationship in order to attend. It's open to anybody who is just interested in kind of learning when you do kind of get into that space. What does that look like? That's at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, sharp. Dead serious. 5:45 is a better time to plan. If you are not married, you will be quickly escorted out at 7 p.m. 'Cause the last hour is for married couples only. But yeah, if you want to come back, call Caleb, ask him the types of things we talk about. And
Yours is still bleeding.
poor kid. Yes.
Going back to the party, Holly suggests the time change so that the food is earlier, so we don't have to wait as long for Frito pie.
Hey-o.
If you'd like to cook her.
Yeah, let's go.
That sounds like a long way to get to Frito pie.
It's correct. I was just letting Dad think that that's how we were doing it. We're actually eating before.
Yeah, I don't really care how it goes in fairness. I assume that's the way things work. But maybe the blessing under kind of the coolness of darkness.
No, that's nice.
That'd probably be that would probably land a little better. Right?
I'd feel better.
We will have a hangry volley on our hands.
Yeah, oh yeah, because people are like, okay, shut up. Let's just eat. We don't care about blessings. We just want to feed the flesh. Come on, man. Oh wait, hold on. Did I say that out loud? And also Ancient Paths, kind of mentioned, starts Thursday evening, Friday evening, Saturday morning, day-ish. If you are interested in learning more about that, talk with practically anybody, the Sharps in particular, kind of run a point so they can fill you in on what that actually looks like and what it means. It's a great resource if you're interested.
We have 8 slots left.
That we need to
8
fill.
slots. And if you don't buy this car, I got another guy ready for it like that. So
He told me.
I can't hold it. You know, if they come back this afternoon to buy it like they said,
This is
sorry.
real estate, man. There's no contracts. Yeah.
I think that covers most logistical.
So I think in that
elements.
regard, as far as a Rev Shabbat and Torah study next week, probably suspended in lieu of Ancient Paths.
That's how it likely is gonna. I think once we get our numbers and kind of know, we can maybe call a little more direct on that.
So
Friday
just
night.
ask.
Yeah, stay in the loop, ask around. We may have a Friday night dinner someplace, we may not. It kind of depends on how things shake. So just
Okay.
keep your ears aware.
We'll keep the website updated too.
Yes.
So if you want the website link, let me know.
If you're interested in doing ancient paths, it's $59, and it jumps up to $79 2 days out from the event. So it starts Thursday. That means if you don't sign up by Tuesday at 6:30 p.m., then it'll jump up to $70. So sign up on before then. So. Yep, and just talk to me for details.
Do you want to give a plug real quick what
What it
Ancient
is?
Paths is?
Yeah, so Ancient Paths is a ministry that was founded, I don't know when, but the man who essentially founded his name is Craig Hill. You can Google it. And Family Foundations International. It's based off of Jeremiah 7, where it talks about the ancient paths and how Israel and God's people have forgotten the ancient paths. And so this came out of a ministry where it's a healing ministry. For me and Maddie in particular, this past summer, we saw a lot of core reasons as to why we do what we do, in not the positive sense, in the bad sense. And so there's a lot of emotions that kind of come to the forefront of things, anger, fear, whatever, name it. And then from there you see that it's actually based on a lie that you believe, and then there's truth to be imparted from the Bible. And then you receive, or you get the chance to repent and kind of forgive others, or like forgive God, forgive whatever. And then from there you get to impart blessing. You have some people who are mentors, who are our mentors, who are in their 70s, 80s, and they've been doing this ministry for a long, long time. And it's been a part of our community for, like 20 years, something like that. So it's just like a really incredible time to be in intimacy with Abba, and it's really raw. And like I said last night, it's like you get out what you put in. And so it's a matter of, if you're willing to go there, there can be extreme healing. That's about what I would say. Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid tool for sure, and it's kind of stood the test of time. And it does very quickly things that may take a long time otherwise. Anything else before we get rolling in our 5.0? My hair's gonna be blowing. Yeah, my eyebrows are gonna be fluttering in the wind. All right, so we're Exodus 35 through 38 today. Do we have a recap?
You got it today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Moses, so we're Exodus 35, 1 through 38, is it 20?
Mhm.
20, yep. So the first 3 verses are about Moses teaching the rules of Shabbat. And this is the 4th time so far in Exodus that it's been mentioned. And there's an added element to it of do not kindle a fire in any of your dwellings, specifically on Shabbat. And then for the rest, it is about Moses asking the Israelites for a donation of gifts, and those who are skilled to help build the tabernacle, including extremely well described details of the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering, the bronze basin, and the court, and all under the direction of Bezalel and Aholiab. I think that's how you say his name. But throughout these 3 chapters, it's all the details of these elements that go into building the tabernacle. And that is what I have. That is the diet description.
All right, so this is. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah. You want the Haftarah and the New Testament? Do you have those? Or do you want-
I have those 2.
Okay.
Prophets, 1 Kings 7, 13 through 51. It's about Solomon sending for Huram, Huram, who sends Solomon's building of, or who helps Solomon's building of Yahweh's temple and the bronze elements that Huram is a specialist in. 2 Kings 11, 17 through 12, 16. Priest Jehoiada helps kill the pagan priests and to bring the temple back to Yahweh so that King Joash may begin his kingly reign at the ripe age of 7 years old. And he starts with repairing the temple, and he reigns for 40 years. Ezekiel 45:16 through 46:18, the standards for keeping appointed times such as Passover, unleavened bread, Shabbat, and new moons. And then the Brit Hadasha, we're in the New Testament now, quote unquote. Mark 6, 14 through 29, the banquet where Herod kills John the Baptist. 2 Corinthians 9, 1 through 15, the principle of sowing and reaping, and Paul spurring the Corinthian church on in their faithful generosity. Hebrews 9, 1 through 14, describing the elements of the tabernacle in relation to worship and how the blood of Messiah was perfect before Abba in the tabernacle so that we may serve Abba. And in Revelation 11, 1 through 13, the court is reserved for the nations. The two prophets are referred to as the two witnesses, which comes right before the last trumpet. Whoever tries to hurt them, they get super hurt. And these two are to bring plagues, and it says they will be murdered by the beast of the pit, only to be resurrected and brought into heaven with an earthquake that comes. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so this is the application of the instructions that were given over the course of several chapters back. So is there anything new to discuss? Kind of dry and boring and not really a whole lot to extract. So anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, objections to the Word of God? Brian has one.
Why would Abba not want us to kindle a fire in your dwelling places on Shabbat? I think all of those words are meaningful. It's intentional that it's talking about dwelling places specifically. Does that make it okay to do it in the forest? If I've already collected the firewood, because Numbers 15 talks about the man who collects firewood and then he gets killed for collecting firewood on Shabbat. But we lit candles last night, right? So it's like, that's a fire. They didn't have electricity back then, so how did they meet on Erev Shabbat? Must have had light somehow. Essentially, what's the bigger point here? Or what's going on? There may not be a bigger point, but I just had that question. I don't really know what's going on.
Yes.
Was there a special significance of fire back then? Because that was like the main source of light and heat and how they would cook food. So I'm assuming it's probably more important in their culture than it is in ours. So maybe there's a deeper significance to that.
I would agree with that.
It could be that a fire is more intensive than candle lighting. You have to put a lot more effort behind it. Split the wood, gather the wood, get that all stacked up in the right way, and then spend a good time getting that first spark.
Perhaps, but you could also set that up Friday afternoon in the fireplace, ready to roar.
Yep.
For Saturday morning, at which point you just start tossing things. I know in wintertime, it's kind of how we do things, but...
Or if you're living in a tent, your fire's going all night to stay warm usually. You're going to have coals. You just stir the coals up, throw more wood on. You don't really have to do much.
Yeah, because if you are living in a tent and it's 5 degrees outside, it's not like you have R30 in the walls that's keeping everything there. So are you supposed to freeze for a day?
Could there be a connection to cooking and making food?
In Exodus 16, there are commands to make double the food on the day before, so you do not have to cook on the Sabbath day.
That is correct.
Well, my translation says you shall kindle no fire, which is set or light a fire. So maybe it was you're not supposed to start a new fire. You should already have it going. And maybe you put a little effort into it where you keep it going, but you're not supposed to do all the work. You were already supposed to do the preparation like Friday, the day before, or whatever.
So let's maybe step back just a touch and look at the larger projection of what's being communicated here. It's to not work, and it seems oddly out of place, in fairness. He pulls everybody together, and he's like, 6 days you can work, but not on this one day. And then it goes into the construction of the tabernacle, the actual construction. So we get a reminder out of the gate that yes, you are doing something that is incredibly high level, but even that does not supersede my model of creation. That this is how it works. You don't break that for the sake of saying that you're serving me. You know, if you're trying to preserve life, we've talked about this before, then absolutely.
You will live by these commands. Operative word, live.
Mm-hmm. But if it's even something as grand as building a house for God on earth, even then you take that day and you make sure you keep that set aside.
Yeah. Seems like it's been coming up a lot recently, like what is noble versus what is obedient. And those are completely, can be in the same ballpark, but can be completely in the opposite ballpark. Yeah, just a lot of people who say things, I did this in the name of the Lord, and then you see like the fruit, and it's like, oh, well, I don't know. They're just, you gotta be careful what you deem as holy and what you deem as common. And, yeah, I think that's, because in verse 2 it does say that a Sabbath of solemn rest, so I think that makes sense. That's, we're talking about work here, we're not talking about fire.
Right. And, you know, it could be, the punchline to all this is I don't have a direct answer for the question you initially asked. I just want to say, go ahead.
Yeah. Looking at the word in the Hebrew, it literally means a strong pressing down. And it has a couple connotations. One being fire, pressing two sticks together, friction fire. But the other one also is despair, or like the idea of arguing.
Fire of indignation.
Not necessarily what's being conveyed here, but that this word is an aleph and a sheen. So it's the ox and the teeth, strong pressing or cutting.
Yeah.
So it could also be in reference to not causing division or strife in your household.
And that's most places that I've studied over the years.
That's where they lean.
It kind of leans into that space of this is not a time of contention. This is not a time for you to try and resolve your issues and be irritated and argumentative. You're supposed to be a holy people. There's a new level for you to operate in. I kind of, for me right now, in my very ignorant, loose understanding, I liken this a little more to an idiom in some ways, similar to don't boil the goat or in its mother's milk. That's attached with offerings from the previous year to this next year every single time it's used. All 3 times it's brought up, it's in that context. It's not a command specifically about food in the narrative, in none of those. So I kind of lean a little bit into that space, and if the fire is this element of contention, Yeshua said the same thing. You know, if you have an issue with your brother, you go resolve it before coming up in here.
Well, if you put it into that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. If you go, okay, it's the Shabbat, but my neighbor's donkey fell in the pit. Are we going to help him? Or, no, sorry, I can't help you today. It's Shabbat, I'm resting.
And that's a very
Are you-
rabbinical position.
Are you, that's going to take that position where now you are causing friction between you and your brother, you and your neighbor, you and your family member, you're kindling fire, essentially, where it could cause destruction later on, and you do not even know it. So actually being open to the idea of, the true spirit of the law rather than the letter of preserving life.
Yeah.
Yes. But I mean, that's pretty far interpretation on my part, but in that space, makes some sense.
If you think about those that have been brought up in church, Sunday morning you're going to church and everyone's in the car.
Everybody's already
And
so upset.
everyone is like screaming at each other and why can't you just, we're gonna be late, and it's, if you can't pretend like that doesn't happen. Then you get to church and you're like, praise Jesus. And the kids are like, really? Really?
And then they become teenagers and then they show you what you planted years prior.
So that just, when you said that reminded me of that, and just being like, okay, this is not the time that be like, seriously, you left your shoes out again, or your underwear's on the floor in the bathroom, come on, pick it up.
I'm like, hey, I'm a grown man. You leave me alone.
I don't know if this
this is like this was a grain of salt, but whenever I read it, I kind of read lighting a fire as in any sense doing work, because fire spreads, and whenever I start something, I tend to want to finish it. And so if there's something like, okay, I just need to get a little thing done on today, it's kind of like a deadline. And so you go and you do it. It's like, it's not much work. You're not really dreading it. So you're not really being distracted. But then you start doing it, and then you start doing more work, and it's like, oh yeah, I also have homework to do. I can do that too. And now all of a sudden your day of rest is gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a great point, because you're exactly right. That's what ends up happening is the small concessions lead, if you're 1 degree off course, within a mile, you're not in too much trouble. In 500 miles, you're in dead serious trouble. So it's those little changes and that slight deviation that is one of the reasons that the Pharisees did what they did of establishing all these hedges and rules, was to in some way try and preserve that element that it doesn't get broken. But then it ends up becoming burdensome, because those end up becoming the rule, and you end up deviating as a result of that just the same way. Instead of the genuine, sincere quest to want to just honor God with a big period and be okay with that, instead of all your little caveats underneath of whatever it happens to mean to you.
So all it takes is a spark.
Yeah.
I think that's a very strong principle, is that honoring God is not defined by you. You do not define how to honor God. Man does not define that. Because that prevents you from going into the ditch of both lawlessness and legalism.
Yeah, and usually people that are under oppression on one side of that ditch, their freedom is on the other side of that ditch.
Yep.
That's why you see generation after generation, they cycle. Super conservative, strict parents, very liberal, loose children who are going to then have very conservative. It's just this teeter back and forth as you run through the generations, because I don't align with that. I got hurt by that, whatever the case may be. So instead of what is truth, it is, I'm going to do the opposite. And that's the ditch I'm going to jump over into. You see that a lot with people that transition into out of a standard church model into a messianic community. It's jumping the road, the path, and it's jumping over into what seems like an opposite in every way. Like, well, they did this, we're going to do everything exactly the opposite. And they didn't do everything wrong, is the thing.
Right.
So then you overcorrect with a lot of things that are contrary, and it's just a battle back and forth. And it's not until you can level up and stand on the road and actually walk the path, walk the way, that you can start to understand where these people are, why this is the case, it's all rooted and wounded. Woundedness is everywhere. That's all it is. Hurt people is how it goes.
I do think there's a very big danger in that kind of thing, because you could oftentimes end up that you just want to seem like you're following the rules better than your neighbor, rather than you're seeking to help each other honor God in the way He wants, because it can very easily lead to a sense of pride, which I think is far more poisonous to the soul than just doing a little bit of work on Shabbat. That kind of thing can be much more poisonous.
I agree, and I think what it comes down to, and this is the whole point of everything, is that we seek Him above all else. And we use Him as our guiding light, not the words of man that have been framed to keep us into a narrow lane. It's having that relational piece, which is why we end up seeing later on some of the prophets say, or Abba tells them through the prophets, that I loathe your festivals. I hate your new moons. Your offerings are trash to me. So you read it on that one off and you're like, oh, well, that's all done away with, and now we don't have to do. The point is, they lost their way as to what those things were there for. They started doing it out of obligation, out of, well, this is the rule, well, I'm just going to show up, and the money changers. You know, Jesus himself was there to upend this whole thing because they had turned it into a marketing system of people coming in. It was very mechanical. Let's just make sure that this offering gets registered, and I'm clear now. It has nothing to do with relationship with God. He gets removed from the equation entirely. And when that happens is when his anger boils. And that's when he starts coming in with the strong language. So you're exactly on point. It's all about people at the end of the day. It's all about preservation of relationship, establishing relationship. That is the full message of the Bible outside of the redemptive piece, obviously. But it's all about relationships.
It'd be kind of weird if it wasn't, like, because God created all of us, and if he wants the best for us, then he wants us to experience his creation. So,
Yeah.
it'd be really weird if that wasn't the message.
I think this ends up redefining the power behind the commands then. It's not a case of do and do not, but this is how you relate to God. This is how you relate to others. This is how you relate to the land. And so in that case, it's still technically rules, but it's not necessarily imposition. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so like the last 5 commands, they all start with this word lo, which means no. That's why it says do not murder, do not, do not, do not. So it's like very...
Yeah.
What it's actually saying is no. So no stealing. No murder, meaning that's 2 sides of the equation. You don't do it and it's not going to be done to you. You walk in his path, there's safety there because you will not experience those things happening to you. But also there's the other side of you don't do this to other people either. There's a receiving and a giving with all of those that pivot both ways.
So in that case, it's a factual statement of what's going to happen, and a command in that case saying, you will not do this.
Sowing and reaping.
It's sowing and reaping in a pretty high level, yeah.
I think with the Christian mindset, we think, oh, I asked for forgiveness, therefore I'm not going to reap the consequences for my action. And Jesus actually is like, nope, it's like even a million times worse. It's even harder.
You've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you,
Yep.
think about it.
Yeah, when you push that stone and it starts developing its own inertia and it's rolling down the hill on its own, and then you realize, oh, that's going towards a crowd of people. Whoops, I apologize. Please forgive me. Okay, well, now I'm good. The consequence is still going to follow. This is the natural order. The idea is these things dissipate over time because you stop putting those things in play.
Step 1 is quit feeding the fire.
Yeah.
Step 2 is maybe grab an extinguisher.
That's generational thinking, right?
It takes generational thinking, and we're not conditioned for that. We're not even conditioned for our own 5-year thinking. We're conditioned with the next 3 or 4 hours, maybe the next few days, and well, what's the next week look like? And then, okay, well, if it's longer than that, I'll pencil it on my calendar and we'll see what happens. We have zero concept of longevity as far as us putting something in the ground, something coming up 6 months later. We're too stupid to understand this because we want it right now. I want an apple, I'm gonna go to the store and get an apple. I'm not gonna plant an apple tree, wait 5 years so I can eat it. What are you, an idiot? I'm not doing that. And then in 5 years, guess what I'm doing? Going to the store, getting me an apple because, well, I don't have time to plant a tree. It's 5 years from now from me to.
Recipes would be a lot different. Estimated prep time, 5 years.
This is part of the reason Napoleon was so powerful. There's a quote from him saying, I want my soldiers to march in the shade when they're back home. Talking about Paris. And he tells this to one of his advisors and says, but that's going to take 20 years. Turns around, looks at him and says, so get planting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is today. That's how it goes. But we still, I'm not getting any fruit from it. I'm going to have to watch over this thing. I'm going to have to make sure water gets dropped on there because it's not able to sustain itself the first year. And then when the stuff falls, I have to wait 3 years and just let that all fall on the ground and rot so that it can continue to fertilize. And then the 4th year, all the stuff that comes, I got to give that over to Abba. And then in the 5th year, I can actually have some. Anybody got time for that?
But then you get it for the next 200 years.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
if you can't even think that, because, those here that are single, like not even married, it's very difficult for you to look at the sin that I'm doing today is having effect upon my children that aren't even in existence.
And their
Let
children.
alone
Their children.
my grandchildren.
Four
I mean,
generations.
and so you're not thinking, wow, I really shouldn't do that. I really shouldn't say that because this affects all this that I can't even see ahead of me. And then you become parents and, your kids are little and you're like, okay, yeah, I gotta clean up my junk and, you're out someplace and they say a bad word and you're like, wonder where they learned that from.
Mom.
Nice play.
And so
She just can't keep it together. I don't know why.
then you're like, oh, okay, well, I better clean this up now, and then, and tell the kid not to do that. You're still not even thinking of your grandkids or your you're not even looking forward to stop your crap now.
But here's the most sobering part. One of the most sobering pieces here is once you see the grandkids in play, and you realize that is a layer beyond anything you can do, that's when it starts to really kind of sink in.
Yeah, but our grandkids are perfect.
I'm talking about
Let's
other people.
listen. Other people's grandkids.
I'm talking about other people. And it's not that they do anything wrong, it's just you have that realization they're on a path where I don't have that direct seed planting ability. I can run on the fringe, but this is kind of beyond my reach. And you almost, not almost, you got 100% just have to kind of trust that, man, I hope my stuff doesn't surface for them that they have to contend with.
Yep.
I'd like to think that I've kind of cleaned house to some degree and these generational things have been uprooted and will not be passed along. I hope that, the blessing that comes because, those that follow his ways and do what he says is a blessing to 1,000 generations. I'm praying that I've been able to impart that into my lineage as well. But yeah, in my 20s, 30s, you're not thinking about this stuff.
Nope.
Not even remotely close.
But your sin causes death.
Hmm?
Causes death to yourself, causes death to your children, causes death to your children's children.
And then we go to work making excuses. That's the next step. So it's just a mess. It's a giant mess because we want to do what we want to do, and then we see to it that it's done.
That's why you should go to ancient paths.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, the low cost of $29.99.
It's called generational blessing for a reason. It's the name of the seminar.
And we love that idea. Think about your own line. Had somebody in your line, let me rephrase it even more. Secular Jews who don't even really acknowledge that there's a God have unmerited success in the earth today. They're just do your homework and you are going to be blown away at the people in these areas that are just living off of the fruit of somebody in their line following Abba with everything they had. That's incredible. How much more so in your own line would it have been fantastic if somebody was really sold out to where the only thing that mattered to them from sunup to sundown every day that they lived on earth was following after God and who He is, developing that depth of relationship? How much different would your life be today? I'd argue it would be drastically different. And you are, I want to make sure I go on record as saying you probably are living in a lot of fruit of people in your lineage. Just saying. But establishing that as a cultural reality is not something that's done these days, because we're all about our lifestyle and our own selfishness and doing what we want to do, making sure that all the stuff that we like is first and foremost, and then beyond that we'll start reaching into areas, and that's going to come back to bite you.
But even when it is done, in the rare cases that it is, that when that's done culturally, it gets remembered forever. There are precious few empires ever in existence that did this. But were I to name them, you'd recognize it instantly. It just took 3 generations or more for it to be built.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of like all of the kings in Judah. It said, you've done evil in the eyes of the Lord, but for the sake of your father David. And so it was like, for the sake of your father David, it's like these people weren't cut off the way they should have been. Like, he was the most evil in the sight of the Lord, but for the sake of his father David. And so, like, I think that we can see, like, that because of David's lineage, we can, like, because of what David did and having a heart after God, we can see how, like, his evil ancestors still had good, and, like, that led to Jesus, but also, like, because of David's sin, we saw what happened to Solomon. That's why everything broke. And, like, I think Solomon is 6 generations out from Rahab, who, though she did come to the Lord, was originally a prostitute. And Solomon's heart was after prostitutes. And so, like, even though her sin was, like, you know, fixed, and she was in the line of these amazing people, like Boaz and David, you can still see, like, where, like, her life prior to God, like, came full circle into David and, like, further into Solomon.
So there's hope for all of us.
That's what you're saying. All right.
But so, like, there's, like, so, like, you can see where her sin, like, maybe I'm totally wrong, but, like, you can see, like, where her sin came in, but you can also see, like, the provisions that covered, like, all of Judah because of what David did. Even though these were, like, the most evil kings, God was like, this is such a mess. But because of that,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty remarkable, in fairness, because it's that unmerited favor. You are a 100% horrible human being, but because of a promise I made early, I'm going to hold back judgment at the level that it should come.
Jesus is kind of the ultimate fulfillment of that, because he was like, if David was able to save a couple generations down, then Jesus, he can save so much more, because he was the perfect man.
That is so on point. Very well said.
Do you think that, despite the fact that we know that, like, you reap what you sow, do you think that people reap what other people sow instead?
Yeah. Kind of case in point, you go to the store, you're eating apples that somebody else had sowed, right? But aside from, like, the practical, physical elements, there are things that your parents have done and your grandparents have done that have sown value into you that you are going to be reaping as a result. You may not be able to cleanly articulate what those things are, but I'd argue that they're most certainly there.
Yeah, because, like, I was just thinking on the terms of, you might have never stolen anything, as you know, or you might have spiritually done something, but you might reap something negative from that and never know where that came from. And so it might have come from you, it might have come from people around you. I was just...
That's generational curse, basically, by definition.
Yeah.
Just like, you didn't do anything to cause lust or adultery. Somebody in your lineage was very adulterous, and it's been passed down, and you see generation of young men being destroyed by lust. And you can take authority in that position, break those curses, and give that space back to God, and it won't go down the line.
And repent on behalf
Repent
of
it,
those.
It's
And
part of the process.
and this is something, I mean, you bring up in the context of like an unknown. This is something that we have been pushing this mound of snow for a very long time. So this is not new territory. It's not a new concept. This is very well, I don't want to say well known, but it's not a big a mystery as what you think. It's actually a mechanism for you to look at, okay, if I did something that caused this, it's time for that introspection. And that's when you go to prayer. Was I the cause of kind of this thing that's happening in my life? At which point, you seek Abba and then you seek forgiveness if you figure it out. It's called unintentional sin. You didn't know you did it, but the fruit of that still comes forth, whether you know about it or not. Intentional sin is where you know and you choose to do it anyway. That's a different animal. And then once you kind of go through yourself and you're like, okay, well, I'm not really seeing me, then you go into the generational aspect. Is this an issue in my line? And there are tools that have been established to help you see that in all reality. So, no, that's not a strange position or just kind of inquisitive anything. That is very much something we've spent a lot of time climbing into.
So, Matthew, to answer your question to answer the logical question there, do your parents own any fruit trees?
No.
They don't? Okay.
Not literally.
Not literally? Okay. Because at my parents' house, there's 4 or 5 of them. Cherry tree, a couple of pecan trees, apple tree. And we had a peach tree that's actually starting to produce again. My parents planted not a single one of those. But they bought the land it's on. And so now they get the fruit of that. And now I get the fruit of that. I grew up eating a lot of cherries, put it that way. In the same manner, if they were to cut that down, that cherry tree, I wouldn't have cherry trees I wouldn't have cherries anymore growing up. So yeah, to answer your logical question, if this applies to fruit trees, something as simple as that, where you can eat the fruit of the labor of others, how much more so does it apply in the family line? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It doesn't particularly have to be familial, but like generationally you learn from your parents and stuff, so it's probably even stronger familial.
How much more?
But even adopted children, you can, when they're adopted, they still have the tendencies of the biological parents, of which they've never grown up with, they've never known. And the same things are there, good and bad, but the bad stands out so much more. And the same things happen to them that they didn't even know, even if they had no idea who the bio father was. Those things still affect them.
Kind of a mixture of nature and nurture.
It's a very odd thing to witness because behaviors, from a common sense perspective, should not be something that's passed down. Behaviors typically are learned type things in a lot of type analysis. But when you see behavior surface that are connected above, when there was no teaching of that behavior, that's when it starts to get your attention.
I think some of that is because of genetics. And there's also something I've seen is that it's like that's just averages. Like on average, children are going to behave in ways that are similar to their biological parents, but it is something you can break. Or like at least in something I've seen in my family, like you can have people who come from pretty bad circumstances. Their parents were in like not great situations, but they were able to like find a good community, be able to lift their lives up. And the converse of that is people who are basically given everything in life. Great parents, good schooling, all that stuff, plenty of love and attention, and then they just end up completely throwing it all away. And it might not make complete sense, because it's like, well, where did that come from? And some cases it's like, well, grandfather or grandmother was kind of like this, so maybe there's some genetic explanation, or it's caused by their sin or something, but it ultimately does come down to the individual's choice whether or not to rebel against their parents and God, or to try to, no matter the circumstances, follow God and trust in His good will.
And that is the key element there. People that are left to their own devices are gonna follow the path of least resistance, which is downhill. It's when you decide that there is a bigger turn that you need to make, that's when you can start to address. So just because you were born with, so a generational iniquity that's passed from line to line, because it was acted out here, doesn't necessarily mean it's acted out here. It just means that you are more susceptible to turning into that very quickly if you lose your guard. If you just let things down and just let things go, there's going to be a natural gravitation that kind of pulls you into some of these spaces. It doesn't mean that by default you will absolutely behave like that, because choice is involved at an incredibly high level. And hopefully that choice is grounded in who Abba is.
You could look at the Egyptians who came out of Egypt with the Israelites, right? A mixed multitude. I don't know how many generations, presumably 400 years, right, of people worshiping Egyptian gods, but then these people, seeing the might and power of Abba, decide to lay everything down and follow after him, and they're brought right into the kingdom, part of that mixed multitude. So you can turn away from hundreds of years of sin and debauchery, repent, and actually still come out and be considered part of God's people.
Kind of like the prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're staying in the Bible, but I do think that science does reflect nature, which is created by God. And it is interesting, there's been experiments done where they cut worms in half, and those worms grow back. And so what they did is they kind of taught the worms oh yeah, if you're in this harmful location, you're gonna get there was a shock floor on them and stuff. And so they learned to move away from the shock floor, and whenever they cut them in half, the side with the brain, there's a side with the brain and a side without the brain. So the side with the neurons, of course, they knew that was going to work on that side. It also worked on the other side that didn't have neurons. Whenever it grew back and it had a brain, the chemicals went to the other side. So I think it's interesting that it's possible that kind of proves that it's possible that some chemical memories and instincts can get passed down by genetics and biological reproduction and stuff like that. And so I think it's really cool that there's almost a 1-to-1 in the Bible of that.
Yeah. Agreed.
But it doesn't relate at all, of course.
Never.
I don't
Never.
know, I don't know very much about my.
No, but I got it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I don't know much about my family, but I just remember my whole life I just had this heaviness of something's wrong with me, which is obviously sin telling, that's that sin and God's telling you there is something wrong. But I always felt heaviness, or there was just something deep on me, or the thoughts I was having, or the things that I thought were not something that I experienced, and so it was arising out of somewhere, but I didn't know. And so I heard at one point this sermon that was you need to look 6 generations back, or what you're doing affects 6 generations. So I don't know why 6 is what always sticks in my mind, but at one point during my first few years here, I was just I'm so beaten down, I am a Christian, I am doing these things, but I feel I can't get out of these things. These aren't even things that my parents brought up or anything like that. So I went to my mom and I was can you tell me what happened on my dad's side and on your side, what was happening for these 6 before me, what were you guys doing, or what was going on, do you know anything? And so she explained as much as she knew, and it made so much sense, and it helped me know what I had to pray for, what I had to target, because 6 up were all these things that were just this horror and abandonment and this rejection and these things that like obviously would make somebody feel a certain type of way, the ways that I felt. And I was like, this had nothing, so like now it's on me, now it's for me to deal with, but like it came before me, and I'm just like, I'm being just compiled with all the junk that came from everyone before me that wasn't washed away. And it made a lot of sense, and that's when like I was able to start feeling better and like see what came from me and what didn't, and like that made it a lot easier to know what was my sin and what was somebody else's. I had to deal with it nonetheless, but like it made it easier to identify. And so I think it is really real because like I can kind of trace back, and I can't trace any further than that because she doesn't know anything. My mom doesn't know anything about past that, but I can trace some of my own tendencies or thoughts or like the intrusive thoughts that I get to how other people acted that I will never know. Like I don't know these people's names or anything, but like it's still on me. So like they've imprinted, like their DNA is on me now, and like so yeah. I think it is very real. But,
I agree, and I'll give you a brief example, and I won't backfill it with a lot of things because you'll be like, this sounds like you're just making stuff up. Just believe me that I probably am making a lot of stuff up. But anyhow, years ago, we kept running into this issue, and we kept revisiting over and over again, to where no matter what the situation, we just could not get justice in a situation. Everything always went the opposite. Here's all the rules, go through all the rules, and at the end, nope, here's a different outcome for you. I mean, continual. And we recognized this was a thing, and we knew it was a thing where because we went through the generic, please forgive us of generational, please forgive our ancestors for things that we don't know about. We did all the generic non-specifics. Well, it was one time before my grandma passed away, we're out visiting one year and sitting out back talking, and we had done a lot of study on this, and the root of this particular curse is, or the cause of it, is somebody, either you or somebody in your line, decided to take justice into their own hands. Okay, that created this outcome to where you can no longer get justice. And these are all kind of defined through the books of Judges, so I'm not really making things up at the end of the day. But anyhow, so she's telling me the story where my dad's dad, so straight up my paternal line, he was what they called the high sheriff in this town called Morganton, North Carolina. And he, apparently there was a black man who was accused of raping a white woman. He arranged a posse in the middle of the night, went, found the guy, tied him to his bumper, drug him into town, held court, and hung him right there in the town square in the middle of the night. So somebody in my family line, 3 layers back, decided that they were going to take justice into their own hands. As a result, I look at my granddad, things that he kind of contended with, stuff that happened, the stories I heard, I'm like, that's there. I look at my dad, that's there again. And then here I'm looking at me living it. And so now I had a point of source that I could go to and repent on their behalf, and almost like a switch flipped. It just all of a sudden, and this isn't magic, this isn't voodoo, I'm not describing it, anything like that. The point being, there's wisdom in climbing down into those areas to figure out why is this the case, because it is very real. Whether you choose to believe it or not is neither here nor there. He says, the sins of the father will revisit the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. But to those who keep my commands, I will bless for 1,000 generations. He literally says this. We just read it last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. This is from the mouth of God that this is said, so I believe it to be 100% true.
And it was very much like a switch. It was like, just like release of all the tension of whatever was going on. It's like, oh, okay, like this So I'm just continuing on in these like pitfalls that they've already had, but like that can stop with me. Like it just made it so much easier to lift myself, or for God to be able to help me like lift myself out of that space.
Yeah. You and everybody here is a funnel in and a funnel out. You are the single point that either allows these blessings to flow or allows these curses to flow. You can stop blessing if you wanted, just by living a sinful life, or you can stop curses from flowing into that bottom generation if you go to work and sort this out. But you're key in that whole thing. So everybody that came before you, those things funneling down. The good thing is the curses only go 3 to 4 generations up, so you're good there. Blessings go 1,000 back, so let the blessings flow. Weirdly enough, sometimes you may not see these things as a blessing as they're coming through, but anyway, it takes time and wisdom. But then it's that part that goes through. Once it filters and starts to make its way down, it's on its own gravity at that point, and you just have to watch it go. And then when you see it, the only thing you can do is go to them in their funnel and be like, hey, look, I did that. Look, now it's starting to play out for you. Here's how we can get this cleaned up. But it takes a lot of work.
And the action piece on that is praying for your spouse, even if you're not married, praying for your children that are going to be coming, praying for your grandchildren, actually putting forth blessing, not only cleaning up your own stuff, but praying forth blessing. Salvation, mainly.
Salvation is the blessing.
In any way that it comes, and usually it doesn't come because we're like, oh, everything's great. Usually salvation comes.
Look, they're not in jail. We're a success. All right. Depending on your family background, that could be a success. You never know. Anything else stand out before we take this ship home?
Stood out. I have no idea why. I have no insight into it whatsoever. It's chapter 38, verse 8. It's kind of when he's making the bronze basin. It's in between the altar of the burnt offerings and the courtyard. It says, he made the laver of bronze and its base of bronze from the bronze mirrors of the serving women who ministered at the door of the tabernacle. Just found that interesting. As far as I have any insight, the word for ministering there is has almost a warfare connotation, assembling, gathering the people for that. No further comment, just seems tucked in there.
Yeah.
Not because everywhere else, all the materials that came were from the people who brought them in sort of wholesale. All right, guys, bringing everything that we need to make the tabernacle. In this particular case, for the bronze basin, it was very specifically from the mirrors of the women who assembled to minister at the door of the tabernacle.
From the what?
The mirrors.
Oh, mirrors.
Yeah.
And so the piece that is going to fold in, this could be a really good segue actually.
Okay. Cool.
That reflective piece in the water, we're going to see is actually a critical piece to our existence. That's the stepping stone, if you will, into the first layer of the healing process. Being able to have that reflection back into that space. So this is the basin full of water. So you figure the priests, before they go into the holy place, they're going into this, they're leaning over, washing their hands, they're going to wash their feet, and they're going to be looking into this thing, seeing themselves for who they are as they're about to go into a pretty serious location. So the wrap up will be in the Psalm, just so you're aware.
Right.
For transition. So, any other last minutes before kind of run through this kind of quickly? So I was praying this morning, and trying to figure, I'm like, okay, we've already kind of covered this stuff. We got the instructions and now they're doing it. Okay, what kind of map do we have here? But it's one thing to know how to build the house of God. It's another thing to actually do it. There's a big jump that takes place from having the understanding of what he says versus walking out what he says. These are likely things you've contended with, likely things that you knew you shouldn't do this and yet, or you know you should do this and yet. There's a disconnect that takes place between what gets said and what gets done. And it's always in the final deliverable that his dwelling place resides. Because when he was given the instructions, yes, he was dwelling in that space, but he was not dwelling in that space on the earth amongst the people. He was there with Moses. So just kind of my jumping point, if you will. So we see in Exodus 35-38, the building of the tabernacle, and patterns given on the mountain, and now it's actually happening. Before Abba's house could go up, there had to be things with which it would be built. So it could have been easy enough for him just to be like, oh, here's a replica of my throne room on the earth. Look how magical and mystical I am. Don't you think that this is grand? He put it all into the hands of the people. It was up to everybody to volunteer their offerings in order for this all to come together to build him a house on the earth. It rested in the hands of men and in the hands of women in order for him to be able to have this presence amongst them. This is gigantic because he's the creator of the universe. He can do anything he wants. He can smite us the second he feels like it. He can lift us up the second he feels like it. He can put Joseph into the dungeon. He can pull him right back out. This is the reality we're dealing with. And yet, this thing that Moses saw is now going to be put together through the offerings, the free will offerings. And make sure that gets pointed out over and over and over again. Those whose heart says, I want to give. This isn't a command to everybody sitting at the base of the mountain to offer up your stuff. This is a call for anybody who wants to. You have the opportunity. And so they did. So Abba wants to dwell in this space, but he needs for us to want it in equal measure. So as a rule, this kind of applies to our life. He's not going to force himself into your life. He wants an invitation. Step number one. So looking at the level of detail that Abba gave in the design of the tabernacle, we see that everything is there for a purpose. There's not one detail that is useless. There's not one little eyelet in the curtains that has zero use. Everything has value. And if we were to take this and look at it through the lens of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, we see that we are now this tabernacle. We are now the temple. So all of those details are details about us. Everything that's in there, everything that's outlined, everything described is an element of our being. So essentially, the design of the tabernacle is a map of man. So if you're unsure of who you are, you can look closely at what's written here and you'll begin to know yourself. It's both encouraging and terrifying because we tend to we don't want to know who we are. It's better off that way. So there's a progression into the depth of man. When we start with the body, there's the view of the tabernacle from the outside and can be made beautiful for everybody to see. The reds, the purples, the blues, the white linens. It looks great from the outside. People are looking over. Oh, wow, this is very magical and mystical and great. But this is, if you are the tabernacle, this is what we tend to see. We see the part that looks all nice from the outside, what you allow us to look at. This is what we see, and we're like, oh, yeah, all right, that's okay. But then It's through their eyes. This is the gate into who they are. They say that, the eyes are the window to the soul, is kind of one of those little sayings. And I think this is more true than we care to realize. It's not eyes necessarily into the soul in a mystical way as much as eyes into the tabernacle, looking through the gate of the tabernacle into the interior of man. And the eyes are the entry point into the being of a person. This is where you engage. You can see pain in people, you can see joy in people, so on and so forth. But the second you come in, there's the altar. So the first thing you see is the place of sacrifice. When you engage with people, and we're mainly talking believers here for the most part, just to simplify matters. But generally what you're going to be talking about, if you're trying to get into a healing type structure, a ministering type situation, then what you're going to hear about is the sacrifice that takes place, what they've given up in order to kind of be here. This is the trade. I've signed up to be part of God's glorious team, and I'm on the winning team. I already know that because I read the end of the book, and yet my life sucks altogether anyway. How about that? I thought it was all, like you were talking about, I thought it was all fixed the second I said, I'm in. I thought everything gets taken care of like in an instant. And yet here I am, sitting with my own thoughts, my own issues and troubles. So most of the time, people are eager to share with you what all goes on at the altar. It's almost a source of pride. Here's what I gave up, and that proves my dedication to God. But what do they sacrifice? The longer you know them, the more you see what's actually being sacrificed. Just behind their eyes is where you find the sacrifices in their lives. But you should never become smitten with the eyes only. No matter how sincere or beautified, this is just the gate. Sure, we can see pain and joy in the people's eyes, but what goes on behind there that fuels what you see, what you can't see, is the thing that we're trying to get into. So what do they give themselves to? What consumes their lives? Is there any oil left for the lamps that are going to be burning on the inside, especially enough for it to burn continually? Is there going to be bread left for the table of faces? Is there a unique blend of spices to be taken to the incense table? Or is it all consumed for everybody to see on the outside, so there's absolutely nothing left? So what gets put onto the altar? So what all gets put onto the altar in their lives? These are the things of value that get sacrificed that will speak volumes to the cost that they're willing to pay in order to stay alive. And by that, I mean alive within their lifestyle. This isn't a tool of judgment. It's an opportunity to gain understanding into the depths of their pain. So just because you get to know people and you see these places where they're conceding and they're letting up, it's not an opportunity for you to be like, oh, I'm glad I'm not them, but now I can feel pity for them. It's an opportunity for you to be able to come into a place of healing. You see the areas of pain and you can strategize on how to reach and get into those deep, deep layers. But it's at the laver, Daryl's pointing out, this is the next layer back. So you get through that sacrifice stuff and everything that it gets consumed, you start to watch this thing. But while most believers can willfully make their sacrifice, it becomes more challenging when they try to face the laver. Can they actually wash themselves clean? Most people can't get beyond this because they know what goes on deep within themselves. They know how unclean they really are. Shame prevents most people from progressing beyond this point because once you have washed clean, it'll be time to go behind the first curtain. And most of us are terrified to enter into that space. Most people keep this strictly off limits. They may parade around the pool but never really immerse themselves. They'll tell you they're clean and they've been active around the lavers, so you have no choice but to believe them. And most rookie priests, people that are trying to minister, that's the rookie priests, they'll think they've made a lot of headway and progress towards this person getting healed, but they're deceived, both the person and the priest. This is generally the depth of most believers. If people peek over the fence, the furthest they will let you see is the outer curtain. So people will let you in that far reluctantly, but it's being able to look yourself in the face in that laver as you're washing yourself. That's where the terror really starts to land because you know what's on the other side of that curtain. So that's the body. Now we move into the mind. So what if someone decides that it's actually time to go after true healing? What if they look in to the laver, they look back at that person, and they're like, I need to actually receive healing, and it's time to enter into that space. So going behind the first curtain opens a huge can of worms, just saying. First off, there's the table of faces. This is the table of bread Brian had mentioned earlier. So the question is, are there loaves on the table? An opening into their heritage and history generally produces a deep and painful fight. This knowing where you came from is not always a bad thing. That's what the table of the bread of faces is there for. It represents the tribes. You need to know from where you come. This is an important piece. It plays a huge role. And then you have to look at the menorah. Is it lit? Is there any light at all? These are the seven spirits of God, and they light up the inside of man. And rest assured, if the oil was consumed before reaching this place, the light will be dim if it's lit at all. Then we move to the altar of incense. And the question you naturally have to come to is, do these people truly ever make it into the place of prayer? People claim to pray all the time, but how many actually make it to the place of prayer? Slaves can cry out for deliverance from outside the fence, but it's the son that enters into that place of sincere prayer. Deep conversations with Abba on your actual state and the state of man. You grieve together and you rejoice together. An alignment of hearts takes place in that space. And our heart is desperately wicked, so it prevents you from seeking out the secret place. The self-deception keeps you locked into a false reality, and that has you working and striving to survive. Beyond that place of prayer is the veil. And if people ever make it to the holy place of prayer, there's still more they must do to experience freedom. Most people keep the veil in place because there's no real understanding of what Jesus did. They may know, but they really don't know. But have you ever taken a look behind the veil? Those that do have an encounter not many have the privilege of experiencing. And that leads us into the heart. The place most people protect with all their might is their heart. It was likely used and abused throughout their life so much that the walls around it are thick and many. Behind that veil is the most holy place. First thing we have is the ark. And inside the ark is the Torah, manna, and Aaron's budded rod. This is our heart. This is what is in this space. Because Abba says he will write Torah on our hearts. This establishes our identity. We'll be sustained by food that comes from heaven. Man does not live on bread alone. That's what Yeshua said. So this is our provision. We'll carry the evidence of the priesthood. This is the authority you are called to walk in. These are all the things the adversary counterfeits. It's what was used to tempt Jesus. It's what's going to be used to tempt you. Above the ark sits the cherubim. And the interesting thing that kind of stands out here we learn in Hebrews chapter 9, part of our Haftarah actually, says, in the ark were the gold jar containing the manna, Aaron's rod that sprouted, and the stone tablets of the covenant. And above it were the cherubim representing the glory of God, casting their shadow on the lid of the ark. But now is not the time to discuss these things in detail. The question we have here is, where is the light? There is no light above the ark in the tabernacle. How is there possibly a shadow? There's no mention of light in this place, so the shadow can only come from Abba himself. He is what dwells above the cherubim in this space, so it has to be him that's casting the shadow down onto our hearts. In this place, do you really understand where you stand? Have you ever even been there? You're in the most holy place on earth, pushing deep within yourself and finding that place where he has set his dwelling place. Deep within each of us. I encourage you to seriously think about this. This place that's being described as you. This Holy of Holies is your heart space. This is the area where all of your pain resides. This is it in this space. This is why your heart must be circumcised. If not, you'll never be able to receive this truth. The ark must be opened for the Torah, the manna, and the budded rod to be placed inside. In order to possess true provision, true authority, true identity, we must let him open us up and impart these for us. Otherwise, we'll seek them from the world. And this is the temptation of the devil himself, is to pull you into these three areas, because that's what he tried to do to the Messiah himself. So why is healing so elusive? I promise we're in the home stretch, so you get to eat soon, don't worry. Why is healing so elusive? We all want it, and we want it desperately. But the fear of exposing who we really are is so much greater than the promise of freedom. We can be healed in the outer court because that's what we let people see. As long as we can continue to perform the public ceremony of sacrifice and cleansing, we are content. Looking out among a sea of people and embracing the false peace, the Shalom, we secure in seeing how much better off we are than all those that are on the outside. This is enough for most people. But turn around and look at the curtain behind you. It's in there that you become alone with God himself. There's nothing you can hide from him, and it's this fear that overtakes you and prevents you from ever receiving healing. You can go through motions in the courtyard all day long, and we'll all be very impressed with your spiritual purity. We'll all be enamored by your ability to spout off biblical precepts and truths. We'll all long to have the life you possess, because in our eyes, you have arrived at the threshold of eternity. But you haven't, and you know it. It's in the privacy of the tabernacle that the real you is illuminated, and that terrifies you. The things you claim to be and who you really are engaged in an intense battle. The areas you long to hold on to because you're hurt and crave justice, you really can't let them go. The anger, the shame, the humiliation you've experienced at the hands of others, it's these that you cannot release. And you know that once you go behind that outer curtain, the seven spirits of God will light up those hidden places. And you know the places, the ones that you hide from everybody else on earth. In a sanctuary, you are naked, fully exposed, your shame lit up, every corner of your being illuminated. Terrifying, isn't it? For me, it is. Probably not everybody here. All the justification falls aside because you have no place to hide it. All the unforgiveness has to dissolve because you realize it has no room in this place. As you move from the outer curtain to the table of prayer, the scales fall one by one, and it hurts. But here's the promise. By the time you reach his dwelling place, you will be set free. And you're given a new heart, one filled with his commands, his miraculous provision, and the mantle of the priesthood. A heart that rests in the shadow of the cherubim, a heart that touches the very presence of God. Oh, how he longs for you to come in all the way, not just into the courtyard. 1 John chapter 3, verse 16 says, the way that we have come to know love is through having laid down his life for us. We ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If someone has worldly possessions and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how can he be loving God? Children, let us not love with words and talk, but with actions and in reality. Here is how we will know that we are from the truth. I lost my place. And we'll set our hearts at rest in his presence. If our hearts know something against us, God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts know nothing against us, we have confidence in approaching God. Then whatever we ask for, we receive from him, because we're obeying his commands and doing things that please him. So I encourage you to go and stare at that person in the mirror. What does your heart know against you? And then ask yourself, is your God greater than your heart? Sadly, for most people, the answer is no, but you aren't most people. I promise it's safe for you to go behind that outer curtain. Go and trade your broken heart for a heart of flesh. Abba is waiting for you to come. Seek to dwell in the shadow of the cherubim, because this is the place of freedom. Then Psalm 91, You who live in the shelter of Elion, who spend your nights in the shadow of Shaddai, who say to Yahweh, my refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I trust. He will rescue you from the trap of the hunter and from the plague of calamities. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His truth is a shield and protection. You will not fear the terrors of night, or the arrows that fly by day, or the plague that roams in the dark, or the scourge that wreaks havoc at noon. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it won't come near you. Only keep your eyes open, and you will see how the wicked are punished. For you have made Yahweh the Most High, who is my refuge, your dwelling place. No disaster will happen to you, no calamity will come near your tent. For he will order his angels to care for you and guard for you wherever you go. They will carry you in their hands so that you won't trip on a stone. You will tread down lions and snakes, young lions and serpents you will trample underfoot. Because he loves me, I will rescue him. Because he knows my name, I will protect him. He will call on me and I will answer him. I will be with him when he is in trouble. I will extricate him and bring him honor. I will satisfy him with long life and show him my salvation. Isn't this what we all desire? This is dwelling in the shadow of the Almighty. And his shadow is only in the Holy of Holies. That shadow is cast above your heart. So cash in your heart of stone for a heart of flesh and trust that you can, in this life, receive healing. You don't need to wait until the next time. You don't need to wait until the next age. Healing is there for you to possess today.
Abba, Father, we thank you for everything that you've done for us, Abba. We thank you that by your Son's sacrifice, Abba, we can come boldly into that place with you. So, Abba, Father, as we seek to be healed, as we seek, Abba, to be made whole, in order that we might be able to be emissaries and ambassadors of your love to the lost and dying world around us. Would you help us to have the courage, Abba, to confront and face the things that we need to let go, that we need to expose to you. We praise you. You are a good Father. We thank you for all your promises and all that you've done. In the name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach,